everyone, and welcome to 1v1 with Boss Rush Games. I'm your host, Celeste Roberts. Today, I have the pleasure of interviewing Retrovaniacs, a retro game review podcast composed of Jeremy Parmentier, Jeremy Gregory, and Billy Holiday. So how are you guys doing tonight?
Oh, we're doing fair, I believe. It's a little weird. We don't usually do the whole video thing. Hats off to Jeremy Gregory, though. He is audio only, and that's for the little known fact. Jeremy Gregory is the looks of the podcast, and he did not want to appear in video form and show us two schlubs up. So thank you, but I'm doing good. I'm doing good. Thank you for having us. I can only speak for myself, though. I don't know how everyone else is doing.
I'm doing fine. I spent all day doing nothing, playing video games, so it worked out very well. Here to talk about them. Can't say that's a worse day, so that was good to go. Also, I don't know if I'd say Jeremy's the looks of Retrovaniacs, but he's definitely the hair of Retrovaniacs. No.
Well, yeah, there's not much competition.
Well, did you guys want to do a little brief introduction for each of you? Just kind of a little background, let people know about you as individuals, if you feel like you're special enough.
Oh. Well, we'll do it. I don't feel like I'm special enough, but I'll do it, because I think most people do. I am just a longtime friend of old Jeremy Gregory there, and I've known Jeremy P. for a good while, too, and was lucky enough that they kind of wrote me in to joining them on this. And otherwise, my name's Billy Holiday. God, there really is nothing special about me when you sit down and have to talk about yourself, is there? It's like I feel like I'm on a job interview where I have to list my strengths and weaknesses. But no, I just enjoy video games, have always played them for almost as long as I can remember. My love of video games is probably only exceeded by my love for professional wrestling, which I also latched onto as a kid. Both things that admitting you liked got you beat up for many a year until they became a little socially acceptable. One of them's not socially acceptable anymore at this point in time. But no, just love playing video games for the most part. Hang out. I ruined the naming scheme of the podcast, and I try to interject some Southern charm into it when I can. Otherwise, no, this has been a depressing exercise because I have not much more special stuff to list about myself.
All right, Jeremy Parmentier, you want to
go? Yeah, sure. I mean, like Billy said, we've kind of known each other on and off for like 20 years via internet things. It seems like that's embarrassing to say out loud, but we've been doing this podcast for 6, right? So you figure there had to be some time before that. Mm-hmm. I was doing another podcast before Retrovaniacs. It was not about video games. It was really not about anything. It was 3 dudes in a garage, basically just talking about whatever random thing we would do. Thankfully, that podcast has been pulled down and is unavailable, as I'm sure it's better to be forgotten. But it's why I wanted to do a podcast. I really like doing it, but I've always wanted to do more with video games. 20 years ago, I was doing like most other people, just like blogs, more or less, video game blogs and websites where I would talk about weird video games I found, because at that time anything that wasn't Mario Brothers was weird. And just over time that idea became, well, why don't we try to do a podcast? I've known you guys for a while. We like talking video games. Let's try it and see if it works. And it's been 6 years and it's going pretty well. Outside of that, I'm big into music. I'm in a band currently, Subtastics. We do the theme song for Retrovaniacs, which actually it's not written for that purpose, but it's a song about video games, so it made a lot of sense to use it. And that's really it. I play guitar in that band and sing some, and then I do a lot for the podcast. We're in 4 episodes a month now, between regular and bonus shows, so a lot of my free time is playing those 4 games, so I can actually talk about them and not just be like, well, the box looks cool. Let's talk about that box for now. I didn't have time to play it, but the box, perfect.
Awesome. Was the podcast called 3 Dudes in a Garage?
No, it was called Radio for Winners. And it was not about winners. It was fun, but it was not appropriate. It was like bro podcast, kind of, not on purpose, but that's what it became. And it was fun, but we just got tired of doing it. We had nothing to talk about. We were like, oh, we have the best stories. And after a year, we're all out of stories. So what are we going to do now?
What about you, Jeremy Gregory?
I am incredibly uninteresting. I
Mm.
have been stuck with these two assholes for the last 20 years.
Yeah.
Forced to work with them on a regular basis.
Mm-hmm.
And I generally just play video games that I don't like. So I think that's a good roundup of what I am.
Yeah.
He's the heart of Retrovaniacs. You can feel it.
Before he met us early on, the most cheerful fella you ever knew. So I've been able to see what doing with us has done over time. But at this point, I think it's the whole Stockholm thing. He wouldn't leave us if he could at this point.
I don't think you could.
Mm.
So since you guys have been doing it for so long, have you ever had anybody interview you and talk to you more about Retrovaniacs before?
We have not. I don't think we've really done anything at all outside of just our stuff. I think one of the things, I think the other guys might agree, that we've kind of prided ourselves on is that we don't really focus on ourselves that much. we're there to talk about the games. And we do have listener questions at the end where not literally, except for maybe one of us, 2 out of 3 of us can't. We have our listener questions where we'll let our hair down at the end of the episode and reveal little bits and pieces here and there. Usually, a lot of fast food talk.
I was going to say
It's all food. Yeah, you'll find the only facets of the other facet of our personality is poor food choices. But no, we just haven't done much because I think we just kind of like talking about games and being kind of the guys behind the curtain for the most part.
Mm-hmm. Well, I really appreciate your taking the time to do this because you've built a pretty active community, especially with Discord. I think it almost feels like its own little family.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the Discord has been it's been a relatively new thing. I think we kind of started it midway, but it's been great. It's awesome having people that you can kind of interact with, kind of directly right there at the time. And a lot of them are people that we've seen that have sent listener mail in or joined myself or Jeremy P over on Twitch and things like that. So it's been great having kind of that array of familiar faces and whatnot. And it's a great group too. And I think anytime we talk about our fans throughout this, it kind of echoes the same thing, that it's actually a pretty cool group of people that we've ended up with somehow.
The conversations go all over the place in that Discord, and I kind of love it. But let's talk about some of your earliest memories of video games, because that's what your podcast is about.
Mm-hmm.
Who wants to take the first drive down memory lane?
I mean, I'll do it. I've been playing video games pretty much since I could hold a controller. When I was 3 or so, my parents bought an Intellivision. At the time, I'm 43, so it was not like they bought it when I was 3 and it was old at that time. They bought it when it was new, and I mean, I have memories of just hanging out in the basement before I was in school and just playing Astro Smash and the Dungeons and Dragons games they put out on those, or at least the first one. I didn't really understand the second one as a kid, but I grown to love it. And from that point, I mean, any system that came out, either I had one or a friend nearby had one. Outside of I don't know anyone with a Neo Geo, but otherwise, most of the major systems from that point on, I've played with them. I've owned most of them as a kid, and then I bought all the ones I didn't have since, within reason. So it's something I've always liked. I don't know quite why it's grabbed me as hard as it did. I mean, a lot of people play video games and then they lose interest in it and get into something else. For me, it's like I just get more and more into it. And sometimes what I like changes. I'll go through phases where all I want to play is, JRPGs. And then the next month I'm like, all I want to play is top-down shooters and nothing else. And I don't want to see an RPG. So, I've tried to keep it with the podcast. It's made it easy to kind of keep varied what I'm playing. Otherwise, I do kind of get into a box where I'm like, this is all I want to play for this short window of time. But that's why I really like playing the older games. I don't have to spend. I mean, I play a lot of new stuff too, but if I don't have to spend 60 hours to see a whole game, that's kind of nice. It's a nice treat. Seems like everything now on PlayStation 4 is which is the only new system I have, is 60 hours plus minimum for a fast game. So it's nice to have like the Twitch feed. I can play through something I've never played before, like Castlevania 3 in 2 days, and I feel good about it. That makes me feel really good. So
yeah. What about you, Jeremy Gregory?
Well, wait, what was the question again?
What are some of your earliest memories of video games?
God, that was a long time ago. I guess the earliest was going to my cousin's house in Kentucky, and he was always the first person to get new video game systems because his grandma would always buy him anything he wanted. So he was the first to have the Atari 2600, and sorry. And he would always just sit around and play that and force me to play like E.T. and terrible Atari games. And he was also the first one to get the NES, where he, of course, the first game he bought was Dr. Hyde and Mr. Jekyll. So my early beginnings with video games were playing really bad video games. So, but eventually I ended up managing to get an NES when my dad got I don't know, he decided to buy one when he got his tax money or something. And that was pretty great. So I ended up with, he bought that with Castlevania and Top Gun. So one out of two ain't bad.
He's batting 500.
A lot of fun. The first level at least was great.
Yeah, so that's pretty much as far back as I go. I mean, I've always been a fan of going to like arcades in malls when that existed. I was way into video games as a kid, and it never really changed growing up.
Yeah.
What about you, Billy?
Well, myself, it's similar to Jeremy's story to an extent. I had an older cousin, and he would watch myself and his little brother fairly often, and he had an Atari. And I recall the first game I really sat down and was able to play. He would sit down and let us play through various things. He didn't subject us to E.T., thankfully. First game I ever played was Jungle Hunt on the 2600, and I was completely amazed by this game. And the way on that one, it kind of changes levels. First you're swinging from vines, and you're running and trying to dodge boulders and whatnot, and from there my parents, up until maybe the PS1 era, were pretty big into games. So we always had some consoles around the house, but there were consoles that were theirs, like the Coleco, which led me to believe that the ColecoVision was something incredible. If they let me play on the Atari, but I couldn't mess with the Coleco at all. And it wasn't until a little bit later, they were hiding that looping from me. I did eventually get to play it. I got to play that Smurfs game, which I quite still to this day, I have fond memories of that Smurfs game. Maybe more than anything else, even though when I go back, it's not good. But I finally had an NES of my own, and I think that's when it took off. Playing Mario, Duck Hunt. I think the first 4 games I had were Mario, Duck Hunt. I eventually got Legend of Zelda, which took off huge with me. I figure was the height of video games that would never be outdone. And I had another light gun game called Gumshoe, which is tremendous. There's a little detective on the screen, and the only thing you do is shoot him with that gun to make him jump in the air and dodge things and collect things. And I just remember loving and I was one of those shitty kids that got right up on the TV with that gun too. No shame in my Zapper game with those. But no, and it's and like Jeremy P said before, I don't know why it stuck with me, but it has latched onto me, and I have not looked away since. I don't think I've had a period of time where I wasn't playing something, from those early days to now. Even when I was out on the road for my job, I would at least bring my Switch along with me and play on there whenever I had spare time. I assume it's probably going to carry over for the remainder of my days, most likely.
That is really awesome because I talk to a lot of people and we'll talk about how we played whatever games when we were growing up, but a lot of them have kind of dropped off of that hobby. So it's
Yeah.
really nice to see people keep up with it and keep that passion going.
Mm-hmm.
What is it about video games that you think is important to discuss? What made you want to start a whole podcast for almost for 6 years now? I mean, you guys are very thorough. How many episodes do you release?
It's 2 regular episodes a month, and then if you join our Patreon, we have 2 bonus episodes that are just game discussion. There's no questions. There's no, like, normally an episode has like a little bit at the beginning where we talk about new things we've been playing, or just a game that's not the game we're talking about that we might have been playing, and then the game itself for the bulk of the show, and then at the end we do listener questions, where the bonus shows are just the game. So we start it. Here's the game we're going to cover. Go. As far as what is important to talk about them, it's a lot of the time I like to listen to gaming podcasts to see if there's a game either that I love and maybe haven't thought about in a long time, so I want to hear someone else's perspective on it, or it'll be someone who I know likes the same kind of games I do, and they'll talk about a game I've never heard of, or a game I was like, yeah, I'll give that a shot. I've heard some good things about it, and I'll listen to their podcast. I'm like, oh, I do want to play this. So I like to try to talk about how the game plays and what makes it different from other games of that same style. That's really kind of the point of the podcast, and then to see, do these games hold up today? So it's not a matter just of like, yeah, let's talk about how much we liked Super Mario Brothers 2. It's one, did we like Super Mario Brothers 2, and then we're playing it now, trying to play it as if we had never played it before. What do we think about it in 2021? What does that game hold up to? I know it's not going to look as good as a PlayStation 5 game, but graphics are a tiny piece of what makes a game fun. So
Yeah, that's a good point. I love hearing other people's perspectives too, and that's how I found you guys. I was curious whether there were any podcasts talking about Earthbound, and that's how I found. Yeah, I was like, oh my god, someone's talking about Earthbound.
But yeah, I echo those sentiments. I also am on the road a lot, and I started listening to a ton of podcasts, just consuming them left and right. A lot of them are, video game related. And yeah, I love when you find one and you got to look for them. You got to look. This thing of, 3 guys talking about retro games, believe it or not, we're not the only one. There's a few out there. But it's a matter of, I loved when I would find one where, as like Jeremy P was saying, where I can tell that our tastes are kind of in the same area, and from there on, it's like, okay, now this is one I can listen to and find out about some games that maybe I have missed, and that's one of the things I love doing on our show. It's either one way or the other. Usually, it's game that at least one of us has played. So you're kind of in that thing where the person that has played it is getting to see if it holds up, like he was talking about, and it's fun to be in that role and kind of look back and kind of just objectively look at a game. And it's also nice that after playing games all these years, it's awesome when you unearth a gem. And you find something that, for some reason, dealing with video games back then, you were limited to what your store had, what your video store had. So it's not uncommon to have missed out on a ton of games. Myself especially, I grew up in a very small town, and we had one little video store. And if it wasn't there, you just kind of looked at it in the magazines and, I figured, well, maybe one day. And one day never came. So there's still a ton of games from kind of the 8-bit and 16-bit era I'm playing catch up on. And I always love when there's a good one. And I hope that's maybe a service that we're putting out there. We have a lot of people that kind of trust our opinion on games at this point. And if we say something's good, they haven't heard of, that maybe they'll go out and give it a try.
Yeah. What about your perspective, Jeremy Gregory?
Well, these are really hard questions. Questions I've never really thought about.
Yeah. She's not throwing any softballs at us.
I guess not. I don't know. Like I'm the kind of person that the more I listen to people talk about video games, the more I don't want to ever hear them talk about video games again.
Mm. Mm.
I started listening to, like you guys, a lot of podcasts back in the day. I had probably a dozen or so. And over time, I just got to the point where I whittled all that down to where I'm not listening to any gaming podcasts anymore. I think it's just one of those things. Like, people like to hear common opinions about video games. They want to feel good about the video games that they used to like.
Mm-hmm.
And I will say, at least for us, we are not kind to a lot of video games.
No.
Especially some that a lot of people really like.
Yep.
But I don't know, like, you got to kind of draw a line. Do you just want to be there to make everybody feel good and, happy and nostalgic about that stuff? And, that's fine. But, for a lot of these games that we're playing, like Willie Beamish, there. A little game that our host here picked for us. I'm sure she has a lot of nostalgia for that game.
Yeah. It inspired a lot of conversation.
Yeah, that too. But it's for us, we're just playing that now. And once if you lack that nostalgia, if you lack that time and place of when you first played that game, it's not there for us. So I really feel bad sometimes, especially for games that people pick. For us to just sit here and trash it real good for about an hour and just be like, there you go. But at least I think we stick to what our opinions are, and we're not trying to sugarcoat things. And I think that's maybe the best as far as like people talking about video games. That's what I would want out of a podcast, and not just everyone super happy about everything.
Yeah.
Well, I think the other key part for, if we're going to say a game isn't good, we don't just say, oh, this game sucks. The end. Like, we like to explain, like, here's something we don't like. Here's a mechanic that makes this game very difficult unnecessarily. Or here's something they could have added, they didn't. And, there's probably good reasons it wasn't added. But that would have made this better. So we like to at least be constructive when we don't like something. We're not just, with the exception of Amagon, which is pure trash. Everything else, we've been very good about explaining why a game is either not as good as it could be, or even if a game is great and we like it, we try to explain why we like it. It's not just like, oh man, Zelda's a great game. Everyone loves Legend of Zelda. Here's a game everyone enjoys. The end. Like, that's a short podcast. There's not much to say there. We like to explain, as if you'd never played the game. Here's kind of the core of how it works. But then here's what's great about it. Here's something that would have been nice they didn't add. So it's a little more than just us coming up with interesting ways to say this game is not good. We like to explain why it's not good, not just come up with new interesting expletives.
I think one of the key things, and I think we do it, and I don't praise us too often. I like to keep these guys, I like to keep them grounded. I don't like to lift them up that often. But one of the things I think we do well is, even if it's a game that we personally enjoy, throughout the episode, we're always able to, at least, even though if we love a game and we put it out there and it's like, oh God, I can't wait to talk about this one. There's always something we can find, even in our own games that we love, to kind of critique. And, because no game is perfect, except probably Link to the Past. And that's a Mansion of Hidden Souls on a Sega CD. Those are your two
perfect library.
Those are your two perfect games right there. But otherwise, we'll always, there's a game a lot of times that one of us kind of champions when we go into it. But even then, we'll find little things to say about it, because I hate, and I can see if Jeremy was listening to podcasts that did this, that's probably why he got put away from listening, or put off from listening, is that a lot of them are not very factual with what they state. It's just kind of blanket statements, and it's kind of what you'd expect. It's a lot of them picking games that are notoriously bad, so that it's bad, or picking games that people like, and without much to back it up, they'll state, oh, this is the best damn game ever. I like things that are more where people are stating their opinions, their clear opinions as to the hows and whys of things, and I think that's something we've done pretty well. Old Jeremy P's probably suffered the most with anything that he picks from the TurboGrafx 16 is an exercise in how much one man can stand and have have rocks hurled at him and still stand tall. But but even then, he can surely admit some faults in those. Not much.
Not many, but there's
many.
definitely some faults in Keith Courage and Alpha Zones. A few.
I think we all shit on each other's games equally.
Yeah.
I think we've all had our own favorite games that we put on
Yes.
there, and I had my beloved General Chaos destroyed. Jeremy P has had every TurboGrafx game destroyed.
Yeah.
Not just TurboGrafx. I would say every game I've recommended, but that's okay. That's fine. That is okay.
Mm-hmm.
It reminds me of those Renaissance fairs where you pay to throw tomatoes at a guy who's insulting you.
That's us. That's us.
Except there's no pay involved. Like, he's not getting anything for it.
No.
Just tomatoes.
I
Just
get
the
the joy of
tomatoes.
Well, I think that's like a thing. Like I've discussed it with these guys before. It's like, we've got people recommending. If it's just our own games and our own opinions, it's like whatever. But like when people are paying us money to cover these games, which we do on our Patreon, I'm sure Jeremy will mention that. But that's when I kind of feel bad, because it's literally like that. You are paying somebody to throw a tomato at you, and I mean, obviously we're not like that with all the Patreon games, whatever. But it's, there's definitely some rough ones in there, and I've always felt bad about being like, oh man, I gotta really shit on this game. This person paid like $50 to $60 for us to cover.
Well, it's some of them have been good, but some people are picking games intentionally that they do not enjoy. So it's not quite that everyone's giving us their favorite game to cover. Some people do, and that's good. And again, that's why I like to explain if there's something I don't like, as opposed to just saying this wasn't fun. But there are people who also do enjoy hearing people complain about a game, especially if they know they're going to go through the pain of playing the whole thing, even if it's a terrible game. So some people do pick bad games. And to clarify, and Jeremy did mention this, it's through Patreon. We're not getting paid. Like, companies aren't paying us to review their games. Well, I wouldn't turn that down. It's not happening. This is through our Patreon. If you join at a certain level after so many months, you get to pick a game that we have to cover. And then, that's the ones where we'll cover it. Like, well, a friend of mine actually is a member and had us cover Casino Kid on the Nintendo, which everyone else probably not as much. He's intentionally picking games that he knows we don't care for, and that's okay. He wanted us to cover Taboo, and I'm not going to do it. So that's for the NES.
Yeah, but that's fun. People know what they're getting into if they're on your Patreon. There aren't any secrets. I'm assuming if they've joined your Patreon, they've listened to some free episodes by that point.
Mm-hmm.
But I think it's important.
You would think that yes, you would think. But
I feel like
we've definitely had our surprises of people from the Patreon that have surprised us with what they would throw out there, or get mad at us for doing. So, we always appreciate anyone that joins that and wants to give us money or support us or whatever. But I think at some point you should listen to the content and see if that's a thing that lines up with you before you just start throwing money at us.
Yeah.
I think there's only one person that necessarily applies to, but I was surprised. I was very surprised. But yes.
Has there been someone whose game you've reviewed unfavorably who was upset, like truly upset that you didn't care for the game?
I don't think so. I mean, if so, they didn't verbalize that necessarily, but I know that there have been people who have sent in games and maybe, didn't expect us to not care for it. I don't know if that means it's disappointed or not. Just a game where like, oh, there's no way they won't like this, and we're like, kind of like this. There's other games that maybe they threw at us that they. What was the Koei game we covered?
Something.
It doesn't matter. Gemfire.
Gemfire.
Oh, geez.
Somebody who was like, I had these great memories of Gemfire because it was one of the 6 games in my video store and rented it all the time or whatever. And it was, we had to play that by gunpoint. We got through it though, but that was rough. And that's hard.
That was the worst thing. Worst thing I played last year was probably Gemfire. Well, I dreaded that thing.
You had to, but I finished it. I finished a full level in it, or full scenario, and I didn't hate it necessarily, but man, that was a steep learning curve. I mean, I play strategy games at some level, but I've never understood the Koei strategy games like Romance of the Three Kingdoms or Nobunaga's Ambition. All those It's not like I don't understand them as in, like, I don't understand people would like them. I'm just not smart enough to be good at those games. I don't think that way or whatever. And this I had to just like hammer at it till eventually I was like, oh, I can figure out I can win this. I don't know if I'm playing it right, but I can win doing this. And it turns out that's how you're supposed to play it. And then I was like, well, now I know why I don't like it, because this is not fun. This is hours of unfun to finish this game. So, but again, I talked to that person afterwards, and they thought it was funny that we didn't care for it, but they weren't upset. So,
So no one's raged on you guys
No,
after your review. Yeah, because most people are mature and have a good sense of humor. But I have read just on the internet, some people take it as a personal affront if you critique something from their childhood.
Oh, yes.
It's like, hey, you're not the one who made this game. You're not the one who put your blood, sweat, and tears into this. This is a review.
I will say, anyone who's considering doing this or ever talking about games, no matter what your actual thoughts are, the Sega Genesis sound chip is incredible, and you should only talk highly of it. You're gonna get a ton of emails.
No. I'll tell you. I am probably, I think this might be the hardest time we've gotten. People have really, growing up, the 16-bit, you had the Super Nintendo and the Genesis. We had both in the household, and all I'm saying is when it comes down to it, and you're playing these games, and a lot of the same games came out for them. You compare them. Let that do the talking. And one of them, it's sultry sounds. Will fucking delight your ears. The other one will probably cause a little bit of the old red stuff to start pouring out of them. That's all. That's it. No, the Genesis sound chip. Final word on it until I make another snide remark about it during an episode, which will probably be the next one that involves the Sega Genesis. It could do its thing in the right hands. Unfortunately, the only right hands were Sega themselves, and I don't think anybody else knew what to do with that thing. So it was just, just sounds coming out of the old tin can. That's all right. Some people are into that. Some people do. People buy record players now because they like hearing the scratchiness and stuff like that. So
hey, some fools put out records like
teach. Who would do that? But to each their own on it. But it's certainly, it's weird in the video game community. I think the things that seem harmless, but could cause a stir. I never would have thought little things like that, or just a differing opinion, would do it. But some people are very, very territorial over there in the nostalgic things from childhood.
Now, this is making me think of a question that's not on the list.
No. We oh.
You prepared your thesis?
I'm good.
My papers I have here.
Well, it made me wonder, so when you were growing up to now, even, do you guys prefer to play games alone? Do you prefer to play in a room with people, barring COVID, of course? Or do you prefer to play online with other people? Does it matter? Does it depend on the game?
I think it depends on the game. I mean, I'm not a fighting game guy. We had a whole month of fighting games last year by my own silly thought that was a good plan. And by week 2, I was like, this was the worst idea I've ever had. I'm not good at fighting games. I don't mind a competitive game, but it's got to be either. I like puzzle games if I'm going to play with other people. I don't mind co-op games of almost any kind. I'm a big fan of. I mean, I played way too many MMOs for way too long. That was all fun. I didn't even mind PvP in those as much because again, it's not a fighting game. It's more tactical in some ways, and gear based. You can do some things to game the system. But if I'm playing, like, my favorite time right now, especially, is I'm by myself. I'm just alone. Kids. I have 2 kids. They're asleep. I can finally get to play Dark Souls 3. Like that's the time I look the most forward to because I don't get a lot of time where I am alone by myself doing that. Now I realize I'm playing a lot of games on Twitch, so I'm by myself with a bunch of people watching. I like that too. That doesn't bother me. But I don't, unless someone there is like, I don't know, really into watching me play a game. I'm not really into watching someone else in the same room with me play a game. It's different on Twitch because I can kind of do 100 things at once. But normally I like playing alone with that. But I don't mind playing with other people. And online gaming, if it's a game that's fun online, sure. But I don't need every game to be online.
Yeah, and I really don't think I'm online too much either. I think I have maybe just a handful of games I'll play online. Smash Brothers, I'll get on. Mario Kart, I probably have put the most time into online. I did have my times with the the old first person shooters back in the day, playing a ton of Call of Duty online. I do miss some aspects of it. I do miss the shrill voices. I miss 11, 12-year-olds cursing at you. Little things like that. Little things that brought the charm to it. But no, I find that most games I play are kind of single player in nature. Not because I'm seeking them out, but that kind of the games I like most of the time are, like more kind of story driven. We've covered some walking sims together, things like that. And those usually don't lend themselves to multiplayer that often. What they do lend themselves to is they are, fun to if people want to sit around and watch. I think games like that, I'll often find, my girlfriend may join me, our daughter every now and then might come along, like Firewatch. I played through Firewatch and was so absorbed into it, I had no idea. I had some viewers on the couch with me for a couple hours of it. But no, normally I mainly a single player guy. Back when you could have parties, I do like the occasional party game. Get the Mario Kart out, the local multiplayer, have a bunch of people gathered around. And games like Mario Party, You Don't Know Jack, things like that were a lot of fun. But that's kind of not happening anymore. So a lot of my gaming nowadays skews towards kind of a more single player experiences.
Mm-hmm. What about you, Jeremy G?
I generally play video games by myself. I do have a curse of really loving MMO style games, but not wanting to actually play with people when I play an MMO game. Like Destiny, World of Warcraft, things like that. I really enjoy playing those games, but when other people come into the the play of that, I start liking it less, which is just weird. I don't know. Yeah, I've always been mostly just playing by myself. Me and my cousin, for the longest time growing up, we played games together and a lot of fighting games and RPGs and stuff like that. But once he moved away, and so it's been mostly just me playing by myself now.
So, speaking of fighting games, when you guys were growing up and fighting games were coming out, were your parents really strict about which ones you played or what you were exposed to?
I think mine. I think the good thing was having good, sturdy 1980s parents who were already letting you watch Die Hard and Nightmare on Elm Street and everything like that. They mostly thought it was more. They thought it was cool more than anything. It especially when I guess Mortal Kombat rolled around. We watched so many like cheap kung fu films around the house and things like that I don't think it really phased anybody in the household. Kind of parent wise, I do know that it did raise a stir with some, but no, I don't know if that's just in my house or if it may be they kind of overinflated the amount of parents that really flew off the handle about that kind of stuff. Mine didn't really mind. While I do have a second, and we are talking about fighting games, I would urge. There's a reason Jeremy Gregory doesn't play fighting games with anybody, and he has the cheapest goddamn Vega in Street Fighter. And I would urge anybody not to play him in Street Fighter. He does bad things on there, real bad things to good people.
Well, that's why I play by myself now, because
that's right.
All of these Street Fighter nights that we used to have, everyone just kind of they refused to participate in them after a while.
Oh, they still go on. We don't invite them.
I kind of figured.
Did you guys remember the Street Fighter the animated movie from like the 90s?
Which one?
Oh gosh.
Was it the full-length movie, or was it there was the Street Fighter Alpha anime that was released in the late 90s?
I remember there was the full length film. I remember bits and pieces from.
The full-length video had Chun-Li versus Vega.
Yes, because when you were talking about Vega, that's what reminded me of that movie. I used to, as a kid, it blew my mind to watch movies and TV shows of the video games I was playing.
Mm-hmm.
And
that was really the first one that was like, wow, this is the video game, and it was done really well. Great animation, great art.
Mm-hmm.
That was a great little video game movie.
And I used to watch the TV show as well.
The USA one?
Yes.
Oh man. That one's great for a whole different reason. So bad.
Oh yeah, and then they had a Mortal Kombat cartoon show. I don't know if you guys remember that one.
They had
they had
Darkstalkers too.
Yeah. I had a VHS of Mortal Kombat, and I was very excited, but I got it and bought it. This was my own money purchase, which those didn't happen too much. And put it in, and it was like 20 minutes of part of it was animated, but the fight scenes switched to this really weird kind of 3D type.
Yeah.
I know what you're talking about.
And it was horrific, and it ended on a cliffhanger. It's probably ranks amongst some of the worst purchases I made as a kid with my own money to this day. I think
it was like a companion piece or prequel to the live action Mortal Kombat movies, I think.
And it was supposed to, I had read later on, was supposed to have more installments, but surprise, surprise, I don't think that one went over that well.
I have a strange memory of the live action Mortal Kombat show that came on after WCW Nitro for a while. It was not good, but it was more, anything video game that was on TV or had a movie or anything back then I was into, because it was video games. It's not that special anymore because everything has its own thing. Mm-hmm. But back then, like, seeing your favorite video game in anything that wasn't a video game was pretty cool.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, yeah. Were your parents strict, Jeremy Gregory? Or they didn't really care?
No, they didn't care at all. Well, I mean, occasionally they'd just be like, get up, go outside, the standard stuff. But, I mean, they never really had too much of a problem with me, like, watching, anything, really. Watching terrible movies, things that were way above my age limit, or any sort of video games. There was a brief time there where Blockbuster was one of the very first places in Indianapolis that got a section of anime, and I was super huge into anime at the time, but they wouldn't let me rent it by myself, so I had to bring my poor father into the store and make him rent things like Project A-ko and Ranma and things like that, and you just see the life and soul draining out of him as he was doing this, but it was for a good cause. I got to watch it.
Ron was awesome.
It is. It's great. I love it. He was just always like, "What are you doing? Like, why are they making you like me rent these? You're a kid. You should be able to rent cartoons."
That's right.
Maybe they
just
thought
wouldn't
it was
understand.
dirty or something. Maybe they thought it was some dirty cartoon. I don't know.
It was considered adult content because it had violence and blood in it and stuff like that. So. There was one time where I accidentally rented Yorotsuka Doji, and I didn't understand what that was. And then I found out very quickly what that was. And,
would you like to inform the listener? Oh,
man, no.
I think that informs them enough right there.
Yeah, go look that up on Google. It's this super, super dark, violent anime movie series or something that was made back in the early 90s, late 80s. Imagine something like Akira, but like completely insane and just full of like sex and tentacle, everything, boobs, that kind of thing. So he was there to rent that one, and hopefully the guy behind the counter knew exactly what he was renting with his young son standing right behind him. Thanks, Dad.
Well, Jeremy P., what about your parents? They're probably the same, huh?
Yeah, they didn't really care about video games as far as or movies. I mean, and I think Jeremy kind of hit it where violence was not a problem. They didn't care. Like, that's fine, no big deal. It's all cartoony and goofy. It's not realistic violence, so it doesn't really matter. But if it was in any way sexual, that's where it would be a problem. Like, oh no, movie-wise, there aren't many sexual video games on the Nintendo, but like movie-wise, they didn't care about any violent stuff. Like we used to rent all these horror movies when we were kids, and I mean, I was 8. Watching Evil Dead because it's what was at the video store. I'm like, this will be awesome. It terrified me. But if they ever came in and there was a boob on the screen, look out, I'm in trouble, deep trouble. Turn it off. We're not going to watch this movie again. Where did you get this from? Like, you rented it. You were there. We got it at the store. But games they didn't care about. They didn't care. And by the time fighting games were kind of a thing, I was old enough that they wouldn't have cared anyway. So, I mean, I think if I would have been 3 playing Mortal Kombat, there would have been a problem. But if it's about 12 years too early.
I bonded with my dad over video games, including fighting games. He would get really excited when it was Friday and it was time to go to Movie Gallery or Blockbuster, and we'd pick a game that we'd play. And I guess my mother trusted his judgment. This fighting game was okay for the 6-year-old little girl to play, but yeah, but
I mean, I tried to bond with my dad over fighting games, but I learned that you shouldn't be very good at fighting games whenever you play your parents, because he did not. I thought he would be very proud of me with how good I was at Dalsum, and constantly beating his ass by throwing my kick across the screen to hit him in the head. Caused him to get up and throw the controller across the room and storm out of the room. And I was very confused. I was like, what have I done? What did I do? I thought I was doing good.
Do you still play games with him sometimes?
Not really. I don't really see him too much anymore, but there was a time there for a while where I was living with him and I would rent a game, and if it was something that he enjoyed, like a racing game or a 2-player co-op game that we could play together, he enjoyed coming up to my room and we'd play that for, a bit. And that was about as far as I really got with playing video games with old Dad.
Oh.
I think it's gonna be more of a thing for like my kids, maybe Billy's kids.
Yeah.
I play games with my kids all the time. I mean, unfortunately, I've brought that into the house, so they're already like way into video games, and they've unfortunately like decided to like things I don't care for, like Roblox. But otherwise, like I was playing Lego Dimensions on the Wii U. We have one, and my youngest, who's 7, has gotten all into that again. So like we'll play that, and that's fine. And I will be proud one day when they show me a game and then beat me horribly at it. I'll be very excited because I'm still in the phase where I feel like I have to not play my best, because otherwise it's just like, look, Dad beat my ass again at this video game. That's no fun. I got 1 hit on him. So, other than most of the time we just do team things. Like we'll play Mario Kart and we'll all be on one team. And that way, if I come in first every time and they come in, 15th, it's not so big of a deal.
You're carrying the torch for them.
But I can also see them getting better, and it is kind of neat to see how like things are kind of clicking and how they're like, oh, I can see this now. Like with the same son, my son Leo, who I'm playing Lego Dimensions with, he got Luigi's Mansion 3 for the Wii for the Switch, and
Luigi's Ghost House.
That's correct. That's still the name of it in our house. But he, I watched him kind of fumble through the first levels, and by the end of it, I mean, he's clearing out every level on himself and taking on bosses and beating them. And I'm like, see, he's getting this down. He's playing Mario Galaxy now on the 3D All-Stars, and it's fun to watch. Kind of like at first, if you haven't played that game, and all you've played is Mario Odyssey, then he was like, this controls weird. I have to use the aiming thing on the screen. I was like, oh yeah, you're gonna get used to that. Sorry about that. But now he's flying through levels. He's almost finished with the game already. So it's fun to watch them get better at it.
Wow, that's awesome.
I'm pretty sure my wife disagrees that that's as awesome as that as I think it is. It spent a lot of time they probably shouldn't. But you know what? Right now, specifically this year or the last, since last March, staying at home playing video games is probably the best thing they can do. So good. That's what they'll do.
What do you think about games? There are a lot of games that are going back to this retro look, like the game Celeste. A Short Hike has kind of they're cute graphics, for example, but there's what is it? I think it's Cyber Shadow that's coming out. It kind of looks like a combination of Ninja Gaiden and the Ninja Warriors. If you guys remember that game, that beat 'em up game. So how do you guys feel about that? Do you feel like they're breathing fresh life into that genre? Do you feel like they're kind of just copycats?
They do. I can't say much because Celeste was my favorite game the year it came out, and I'm also playing Stardew Valley for like 3 years now, which also is kind of styled in that fashion. So anything I say would be hypocritical, but I don't think it really brings a lot of people towards older games. I think it's just kind of it's subgenre and new players, that play those. I don't necessarily know how much that's making them kind of look back at older games. I haven't seen a lot of that myself. People's like, oh, I started playing this, and now I went back to see, kind of the games that style is based on. I don't know how much of that really happens. I do like it. I do. I think it is something that maybe is starting to get a little overused. But when a game does it right and it's actually a good game and it's not just depending on its style, because there was a lot of that. There was a lot of, hey, look, this is, this game is 16-bit styled, and that's all the game had going for it. But if you can put out a good game in that fashion, I think it's great. And a lot of times they really have just delightful soundtracks with them also. They kind of go back to those 16-bit tunes almost. So I think one well put together that actually has something going for it, I think it's great. It's a nice little throwback for people that grew up playing them. I don't know how many people it would send looking to old games, but I don't have a problem with them really, as long as it's not just a gimmick being relied on to sell.
What about you guys?
It's an older one. Oh, go ahead, Jeremy.
It really just kind of depends. I mean, at this point, I think a lot of people associate that look with just being a lazy indie game, and it's because it's just been done for so long now. But I tend to like it. I've always enjoyed the 16-bit or pixel look. It's a valid art style to me. So if that's the kind of way you want to make your game look, then go for it. I just think you need to make a good game that goes around that art style. Yeah. Because there's some absolutely beautiful pixel art games out there that play like shit, or they, they're not very good games. But then you've got something like The Messenger, which is, it's not super detailed. It's very much in that kind of 8-bit to 16-bit look. But it's a great game, and it adds some new stuff to a genre that, it's kind of like playing a Super Nintendo game that you never got to play. And that's what I enjoy with those kinds of games. So yeah, I'm fine with it as long as the game's decent. So
yeah, I think that's exactly the case. If the game is good, that's awesome. Like I guess Dead Cells and Chasm, I got on the Switch last year. I don't think it's from last year, but I got it last year, and that's another great, like, if you like the 8-bit style, 16-bit style dungeon exploration, it's fun. I mean, an older one, but I think like the one that for me was the first kind of major, really, really solid retro style game that actually kind of took that formula ran with it was Shovel Knight. I think Shovel Knight is one of I mean, hands down, one of my favorite games of the last 10 years. And it just kept getting better and better and better. They kept adding the extra characters you can play as, and it wasn't like, oh yeah, here's the same levels, but now you're this other guy. I mean, it's an entirely new game. The last set of game, or the last expansion that came out for that was King of Cards, that essentially adds on top of the layer that it's kind of this Mega Man style adventure game, It has a collectible card game in it. You can play it against people like Triple Triad, and it's awesome. And I love every second of it. And that's one that it looks. I mean, it's supposed to look 8-bit. It's got too many colors and does too much. It wouldn't really work on an NES, but it doesn't matter. It looks like what you remember those games looking like, and it plays really, really well. It doesn't. The gimmick isn't that it looks like an 8-bit game. It has that kind of feel to it. If you're used to Mega Man, you're like, oh, I know what they're aiming for. But then when you actually get in, you're like, whoa, this is way more involved than any of those games, and it's awesome. So yeah, I like that. But I also think there are a lot of those out there. There's a lot of stuff that people just kind of like, yeah, I can make a real quick 8-bit game because it's a simple graphic style, and and it's fun and it's run and gun. It's 99 cents on the Switch eShop, and you're like, all right, for $1, that's not bad. But would I pay $20 for most of those games? Probably not. It's few and far between. Things like Shovel Knight or the other games we mentioned that are very good, that are worth the price.
I think there's like the new Dragon's Quest. What is it? Is Dragon's Quest? That lets you can basically play the entire game in like 16-bit mode.
Yes, Dragon Quest 11.
Dragon Quest, yeah, that's one thing. And like that's interesting because like you can switch between playing this really nice looking JRPG or in 3D and all this stuff, or you can switch over to a 16-bit mode. For me, I would probably always want to see the cool 3D graphics. That like that stuff holds my attention a bit more, but at the same time, it's cool that they added that in there.
If you had to design a video game. Oh man, that's a tough question. So
actually, we just answered that question, so I think
we did, and I stand.
Well,
I think we did. Mm-hmm.
Kind of alluded to the episode, so people can go to it instead and hear it.
Yeah, and our most recent episode we just put out on last week. I guess the one came out last, or maybe Tuesday. Did I just release Tuesday? I don't even know. I don't know when this is going to air. So the beginning of January, we put out our first episode of 2021. And at the end of the episode, when people asked us questions, one of them was if you could create your own video game. What would it be if it's based on your own life? Not if you could create your own game, but like if there was a game that was Jeremy Parmenteer's whatever, what would it be? And we all kind of had very similar answers, that all of them would involve us driving around in our cars, trying to find places to go to the bathroom and eating bad food. And it would play like Incredible Crisis for the PlayStation, which is the perfect game if you're going to make a game about running around in your car trying not to go to the bathroom and eating bad food. So
yeah.
Yes.
And it's 2020 edition where not all you can't go in most places. Some places you can go in, the restroom's not open. So I'd like the idea of maybe a special mini game thrown in where you kind of try to talk down and barter with employees, like, hey man, what's letting one guy in? What's it going to do? Just like maybe a speech element to it, dialogue choices. Something along those lines. All three of us, I am both impressed and saddened that all of our games were so incredibly similar.
I mean, that's kind of what we do, I think.
Yeah.
At least for me and Billy, we travel a lot. Mm-hmm. That's just that's life. So it's pretty easy to relate to a game like that. I think I mentioned Don't Shit Your Pants. That was the game that the PC. I think it's like a little flash game or some shit that you can play, and it's like an old adventure game to where you basically get up and you have to shit your pants, or you have to take a shit. So you basically just put in these commands, and you're everything you do. It's like there's always you may shit your pants. You're going to shit your pants, basically. It's just how many steps you can get to that point before you actually shit your pants. And I think
it's not exclusive.
Yeah, and especially like you said with 2020 and how COVID has hit, especially like traveling. That's shit. That's like Super Turbo Edition right there.
Yeah, that's right.
Well,
I guess I should have clarified also, if you didn't want to hear the discussion about having bathroom breaks in our cars, we did also talk about Spyro for the PlayStation on that last episode. You could have checked that up for that too.
Yes.
We know what the people are there for.
Yeah, they came for the bathroom questions.
Hey, well, I guess I'm not going to ask this question. I was going to be like, what's the most embarrassing moment regarding bathrooms you've ever had? But we're going to...
Oh, it's a longer
podcast now, but we have answers.
You've guaranteed to add at least another hour or two onto this with that one.
We've all been there. That's all I can say. I accidentally flooded the girls' bathroom in 9th grade, but the toilet wouldn't flush, and I left it, and I was like, I don't know what's going on in there.
That's weird. I don't know what happened. I should call somebody. It's weird.
When you guys were talking about the indie games and the 8-bit and 16-bit graphics, it made me think, what are some of the hidden gems that you've discovered in either in the eShop, on Game Pass, on the PlayStation Network, that were not very expensive, and you're like, I pay a lot more than what I paid for this?
That's tough because it's such a quantity of, especially with the Switch. I feel like the Switch has gone absolutely wild with a lot of the games they put out, and I kind of would originally just get it just to kind of flesh the library out a little bit, which has backfired on me because now my initiative this year is to play through all these little indie games I picked up on the Switch. It's tough because there are just between that and Steam sales, I feel like there's just so much out there. I'll just name a couple off the top of my head, and they're all going to be kind of recent because I'm having trouble thinking back. There's one called 1980X, and it is presented. My only complaint would be it's too short. It feels like it's just getting ready to take off when it ends, but it's presented as someone going to an arcade, and it's divided up into mini games, and each mini game is like its own throwback. Like you've got a game like Outrun, or you've got like an old school dungeon crawler type game, or you got a beat 'em up, something like that. And that took me back, and I got that extraordinarily cheap. I think that was probably like $1.99, something like that. Instantly loved that one. Fear that there may be no more because I haven't heard anything else about it in a while. There was another one, and I did mention earlier, Link to the Past being, amongst those two perfect games. There was one called Blossom Tales, which looked very unassuming, but it looked familiar when I was glancing at it, and it is very similar. It's almost in some points too similar, but Nintendo has it on there, so I guess they're okay with it. To link to the Past in terms of style and all that, and it's another top down, just basically it is basically the Zelda format, and it even makes little nods to it here and there, which I thought was interesting. God, there's so many other ones though. There's so many I can't think of them off the top of my head, but there's been a lot of good experiences. I just finished one called Worse Than Death, which was very story driven. There's a little bit of kind of hiding from monsters in there. There's a little bit of puzzle solving, and that was a great one too. And that's another one I got for 99 cents or something like that. There's just so many instances of those, and I feel like that's kind of encouraging that there's so many gems out there. I guess it's a shame they have to hit that kind of price point before you pick them up. But these eShops, though, it's such a crowded market that I don't think I really would have discovered these otherwise. Just kind of digging through.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I generally don't buy a lot of random games at this point. Mm-hmm. If I unless it's something I've kind of saw like, oh, this looks really good, but my kids will like just check through the shop and sometimes like, Dad, this looks good and it's only $1. Can we get this? Now most of those end up not being very good, but there's been a handful of them that actually were kind of fun. There was a game we got. I think it was one of those Switch games that they put up for a penny at one point, and you're like, whatever, it's a penny, who cares? It's called Watermelon Party, and it's a multiplayer only game, and it's almost kind of reminds me of like the game Pipe Dream, where you get little pieces that you have to put to make your guy walk a certain path. And it's if you can walk this path on a grid and get all the pieces of watermelon before everyone else on the team does, on the screen does the same thing, and it's 4 players side by side, you win that round. And it kind of ranks it like Bomberman after that, where it's like the first person gets 5 points and the second person gets 3 points, and the first person to 20 points overall wins. I mean, it's extremely basic. If I paid $1, I would have been mad, but I paid a penny, and so for a penny, I mean, when we went on vacation this summer, which wasn't much of a vacation since we just went to some other house and didn't go outside and do anything, we played a lot of that, and it was one that I was like, sure, we'll play it, but it ended up being a lot of fun for them and me. So that's one of the few that we picked up that I can remember off the top of my head that was like, yeah, that actually was a lot more fun than I thought it would be. I picked up a few random. I like shmup games, top-down shooters, or side-scroll shooters. I'm not good at them at all, but I still really like them. And I don't know. That's why I don't know if this is a gem or if this is one that if you're in that circle, maybe this was a well-known game. I don't know, but it's called Powarumi for the Switch. It's kind of like Ikaruga, but instead of having just the black and white polarity, you've got essentially like 3 different. It's green, red, and blue, and like you have to switch back and forth between those 3 colors to do damage to green, red, and blue enemies. No one's immune to anything, but sometimes if you use a red shot on a blue enemy, it makes your shield stronger and little things like that. So it's a little more than just like trying to match the weapon to the enemy. You've got to keep your shield level high and your power level high, and that requires you to keep switching your weapons back and forth. That's a really good one. So yeah, Powarumi is probably the one I'd say is the one I didn't know about, and I just picked up at random for I think $15 or whatever, and I would have paid more for that.
I guess I don't do that too much on the eShop. I think I use Game Pass for that, just seeing what comes up on there, what they've got, because they do a really good job of putting a bunch of neat little indie games on there that I generally would never, ever play or even think about buying. But, I found Undermine on there late last year. I love that game. It's a fun little roguelite. The Messenger, I mentioned that. Like that's a great little 16-bit kind of Ninja Gaiden game. The Tourist, I think our host has played no wait, maybe it wasn't. What have you played The Tourist?
No, it's on my list. You guys were talking about it in the Discord.
Right. But yeah, like that and a bunch of other stuff. Void Bastards, of course. There's just a lot of stuff on that whole service of games that I would never expect to enjoy, but just the way it is, you can just download it and not have to worry about it. And I think that goes a long way in actually making you like the games more, because you don't have to think about, well, God, I spent this much money on this fucking turd. But for the most part, everything I've played on there, they do a good job of curating that list of giving you some games that that are surprising in ways that you wouldn't expect.
I love that feeling. I love stumbling upon a game that I've never even heard about and I end up loving it. Although I have to take you to task, Billy. I'm not a fan of that. The Church in the Darkness.
What's the trouble?
It's just
what's the trouble?
I like cults, but I didn't realize I was going to have to shoot people while trying to find people in the
sometimes, cult. When do you remember things with a cult turning out well? It always ends. There's always some bloodshed by the time it's over with.
Probably Outlast. That's a happy cult story.
That's right. No one's harmed in that one at all. That's fine.
It's all right.
See,
I'm just picking.
That's fine. No. We've discussed it earlier. We've got thicker skin. I'm gonna let.
I'll give it some more time. How about that?
Yeah, I think that's it. Yeah, it needs more time.
Well, what are some of your favorite games that you guys have covered? What are some games that you've discussed in your podcast? I mean, you could limit it to 1, 2, 3, 10, whatever you would like.
31. I'll just read down the episodes one after the other. They're all gems.
They're not all gems. Man, I'm trying to think of ones that were not ones I was familiar with, maybe, that were brought up. Because obviously, and I've mentioned it several times, Game Mansion of Hidden Souls, I stand behind as Sega CD. So of course, good luck playing that thing. But I do stand behind that one. It's one of my favorite games we covered. Besides the fact that I was on a minefield the entire time we played through, I just love some of the other games that have been brought up that I hadn't played before or hadn't played all the way through. We did, this isn't like a hidden gem, Secret of Mana, which I had not played substantially until it came time for the episode. And we had a, which was the one? Fire Striker was the one that was like almost like a Zelda almost in terms of the combat, but you attacked with a like pinball mechanic and things like that. That was a great one. I think that was one none of us had played through. And Fire Striker always stood out to me. That's one I've actually gone through and played again after the fact. There's several. There's several that when we cut off recording, there's that relief that for the rest of my days I'll never encounter this game again. But then there's some that I play again. Wonder Boy 3. Was it 3 the one we did?
Yes, it's Wonder Boy 3: The Dragon's Trap. That's an excellent game.
Probably the most phenomenal game that caught me by surprise. And that was a Master System game. It got remade on the Switch. And yeah, I went ahead. I own the Switch version now. I just love that game. That's probably one of the ones that and that Fire Striker that really got hold of me and I absolutely love. And, we reviewed those a while back. And I would say that we have a pretty good track record of, playing mostly decent games, I think, for the most part.
Nice.
I generally just like the ones I think that I don't know. Like, I like bad games, and I enjoy talking about bad games.
Mm-hmm.
So, there's the Beavis and Butthead episode that wasn't too long ago. I really enjoyed that, just because I hated that game so fucking much.
Mm-hmm.
Magician Lord, like just slogging our way through that entire podcast was
that was painful. That's a neat game, but man, that was rough.
Yeah,
it's to be said. There's something fun, even in a horrible game, that we're all suffering through it together. That adds something to it.
Yeah, I mean, it is that, and also just completely just wailing on some of these games is also fun. Like things like Predator and
Predator made me cry when I was a kid.
Yeah, I think the one that I love the most out of all of these podcasts, for some fucking reason, is Super Black Bass. It is a game that should have never been done on a podcast. And it is something that I don't think 98% of the population, unless you are me and Billy or Billy's uncle, could ever talk about this game for more than 5 minutes without getting bored of it. But somehow, we drug Jeremy along for 50 minutes, I think.
Never caught a fish.
About Super Black Bass, a person that I don't think ever caught one fish in the entire game, the entire time that he played it.
But I tried. I tried hard.
Yeah. Even challenged by someone that wrote in the next episode. But yeah, that was one of those episodes that I was just completely surprised that it shouldn't exist, but it was somehow entertaining to at least me.
I mean, my uncle, if he's willing to go to jail for that game, it's worth talking about for at least an hour or so.
I've enjoyed playing through the games. Like you mentioned, you looked for this podcast because you're looking for Earthbound. That's a game I wanted to play forever, and I just never got motivated to do so. And so, knowing that was a game we, let's cover this. So then I finally got to play through the whole thing, and I loved it. Same with, I don't know how I've gotten this far in life without playing through Silent Hill 2. And I finally got to play it last year, and it was awesome.
Mm-hmm.
Same with our last game of last year was Snatcher. And Snatcher's a game I wanted to play. I had it on Sega CD. I had a physical copy, never even got past the first few minutes because I thought I'd get to it later. Well, later was 2020. I mean, I like going back and finding these games I'm glad to play through again. As far as surprising games, we've had almost all the patron picks, even the ones that aren't good, are games I've never played. So that's I like that the most. I like finding a game I know nothing about or just bare minimums about and getting to finally play them. Even the ones that maybe aren't that good are still there's still something interesting about all these games. Like I like to find the thing like, oh, that's the hook this game has. That's what makes this interesting. So I even the games that are pretty terrible, I enjoy playing through them. I mean, almost every game I'll find, even a game that's universally reviled, a terrible game. But once I played enough, I'm like, okay, I get what they're aiming at. I mean, generally there's a few exceptions to that, but even like we mentioned Gemfire, how that's a game that I didn't really get because I don't like those Koei strategy games. But by the second hour of it, I was like, okay, this isn't so bad. I can kind of get into this. I was kind of looking forward to going back to it, even though it was when I started playing, I was like, oh, this is so long. I don't want to play it. But I was like, I was happy that I learned how to play it. I saw what was interesting with it, and I was happy to kind of explore that. So,
What's the longest game you guys have ever covered? As far as like how many hours does it take to complete this game?
it might have been Earthbound, honestly. I mean, we don't cover many role playing games. I mean, Billy and I did over a year. We did Phantasy Star 1. Only because of how our schedules had worked out. But that was, I think we put more time into Earthbound though. But I enjoyed that infinitely more than Phantasy Star.
I would say probably Earthbound. But yeah, it was for the most time we put into one. It remained pretty enjoyable throughout. I think I had some criticisms of the game, but still, it was time well spent. I think putting into that one, and I was a little reluctant to try to do like an RPG like that for an episode, just because your time frame you kind of have to work with and things like that. But once you sat down with it was a very smooth run through that game. And yeah, I think that's probably the most hours we've probably clocked into a game on here.
I think Super Mario RPG was pretty cool as well.
Yeah.
Secret of Mana. The one that really seemed the longest for me for some reason was the Super Star Wars trilogy that we did. That was I mean, it was long. After a certain point, you're just like, I don't want to play this no more. But as far as like the amount of time we spent talking about a game, I feel like the Super Star Wars episode just went on and on and on about how we just kept talking about that fucking game.
Yeah.
Now, for the games that you guys have to cover, whenever you're playing an episode, what if you can't finish the game, or is it your goal we have to complete this game, we have to see it from start to finish? How do you go about planning that?
The goal would be to finish it. The goal would be it's a game we can finish. I mean, if it's a game that doesn't have an end, if we were going to cover Donkey Kong, which we're not, but if we were, that game doesn't end, so you're not going to have an ending to it. You'd at least want to see all the stages, right? There are definitely games that we haven't finished. Normally, we're pretty open about that. If we say, oh, I got this far in the game, didn't finish it. I mean, we the Secret of Mana episode, I just ran out of time. I didn't get all the way through. I got far enough where I knew the game. I knew how to talk about the mechanics and what I liked about it, but I didn't finish it. And I was very open with I got this far. I got to this boss. I have another couple hours. Didn't finish it. That's where we were at the time. I did go afterwards and finish it, but you want to finish the game if you can, or if you can't, at least here's how far I got. Here's what's left. But mechanic wise, I don't think there's anything else I need to know. Or just, I mean, we've had games we covered. Axley was our very first episode, which I don't recommend anyone. But that's the kind of game that if you get to level 3, it's only 6 levels or 7 levels, and you're just not good enough to get past that. Okay, talk about what you did get to and where your wall was. That there's no shame in that to some level. I mean, as long as you can feel, at least in my case, as long as I feel like I put the effort in and I have some notes and I have some real comments about it, then it's okay if I didn't finish it. But if it's just a matter of like, I know about Kid Icarus, I don't have to play it. I know enough. Like, you got to put the effort in,
Yeah, and I think it shows on when you listen to something. I like playing enough where you have an educated opinion on it, and that varies from game to game. And I've listened to podcasts where it's obvious that they may have watched something for a minute, read a few things, put it out there, and that's it. But it depends on the game. Like Jeremy P is saying, if you're playing something like that Axelade that is, same gameplay throughout, not really a lot of story there to be had. If it gets too difficult, you've got a good basis. You kind of know how the game is. Whereas if it's something that is a little more story heavy, you want to kind of try to get through there as much as you can, so you can speak to the story in the game a little bit better. Like when we played through a game like Silent Hill or Silent Hill 2, you want to kind of know the entirety of that story going through, so you can really speak to it and all that. Whereas if it's just and with a lot of these older games, some of them don't vary too much. Some of the, just besides a little change in background here and there, the gameplay mechanics stay the same throughout. So it definitely varies. I sit down with the intentions of finishing all the ones that we try to get through. I think we do a pretty good job of picking games that don't have a ridiculous, especially doing the bonus episodes also, that don't have a ridiculous kind of time dump you need to put into it. You know, a lot of games from back then, fortunately, you know, kind of Lord, run an hour to 2 hours, and you're through a lot of NES games at that point. And that allows time to play through it and then kind of play again and, you know, form an opinion. It mileage varies on it. I think we usually try to stick it out, even through some rough ones. You know, we dig deep if we have to.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it just depends. I mean,
Mhm.
we've got a limited time to play these games, and
Mhm.
we've got a limited amount of sanity as well.
Mm-hmm.
And there's just certain games where you hit a point, and if you're not having fun with it, and you just can't get anywhere with it,
Mm-hmm.
I will throw in the towel. You know, I
Mhm.
think an early example of that was Young Merlin, the minecart
finish that.
stages in that game. I think Jeremy got past that stuff, but I hit those minecart stages, and it was just I can't. I'm done. You know, we still try to do our best to read up on what we're doing and what we're playing, and if there's something that we maybe missed that might have been consequential or something
Yeah.
past the point that we've quit playing. But yeah, we generally try to beat what we're playing. It kind of seems silly to have a gaming podcast if you're going to talk about a video game that you know haven't at least tried.
Mhm.
So you know that's just what we try to do.
I'd say it's a rare exception if there's a game we've covered that one of us at least hasn't finished it. I mean, I'm sure there is some, are some. That's probably a better way to put it. But I think generally that's the exception. I mean, we've done 130 something regular episodes of this, and I can only think of 2 or 3 off the top of my head that none of us finished.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm. I definitely admire the effort you guys put into your podcast because you're also dealing with life like everybody else, and you still find time to play other games that you really want to play.
Mm-hmm.
So that's nothing to sneeze at.
No, you got to have your priorities. You got to.
Well, what are your top 3 favorite systems if you had to narrow it down to just 3?
That's well, I was gonna say it's tough, but I guess it's not. For me, that Super Nintendo, I think probably is always going to ride high at the very top. That's my number one for sure. I think in terms of library of games, that has it's just more solid, and for sports, for the first party titles that are out on it. It has probably the largest collection of games that I remember fondly, at least. And also I've got that's first place. Second and third, it's a big old toss up between the 64, Nintendo 64, and the PlayStation 2, which made it on there just because of these sheer shitload of games that system had on it. And just some of the little oddities I found there towards the end gave that system a lot more life. Like games like Mad Maestro and things like that. Just these bizarre, cheap titles that were the early version of the eShop. Going into the damn Walmart and here's this game marked down for $3.99, and picking it up. That PlayStation 2 had such a large library to it. And it's another one of those where some of my fondest memories involve that system in particular. So that's definitely it. I can't let Nintendo have all of them. So definitely I have to throw the PS2 in there.
I don't know if I could rank them all, but as far as like what really, if I'm talking from an emotional standpoint, then the Nintendo, the original Nintendo, and the Intellivision, and I don't know, my Game Boy, like the first 3 things I really put a lot of time into. As far as games that I look at now and I'm like, yeah, I want to play games on these systems. Again, it's kind of hard because we focus so hard on PlayStation 2 down. Really, a lot of PlayStation games like that. That's that's more of a question that I would have had a better answer for, is what system maybe did I not care for that's grown on me? The original PlayStation has, in my mind, some of the worst aging games. Like, just that's when they first really started trying to do 3D. They weren't very good at a lot of it. It's hideous. There's a lot of just big blocky things that don't animate well. But at the same time, like, we found games on it that are really, really solid and really good that I never tried, or that I didn't remember being very good. But then when you actually get to it, and if you can get past the graphic issue where old 3D looks really bad, you're like, this is a pretty neat game, and I do like it. So the PlayStation is probably the system that's grown on me the most since doing this podcast. But yeah, if I just was like, throw out all your systems but 3, I'd have to keep the NES. I'd have to keep the Intellivision, despite that I'm not going to play it nearly as much as most of the systems there. And realistically, I'm going to keep the Switch. I use it more than anything else in my house. I like when they announced the Switch and they're like, oh, it's a system where you can use it in handheld and on the TV. I was like, who cares? But now I'm like, that's the best thing that's ever occurred. And I regret anything I've said bad about the Switch before it came out.
Oh boy,
more important than any other device in my house.
I'm gonna tell you before Jeremy Gregory answers, we got served a crow buffet over that Nintendo Switch. It was all you could eat, and I went in with both hands. I was heated. I was hot after they did the Wii U dirty. And I was not having another Nintendo system. I love that goddamn thing, though. I'll be on it soon. I'll be on it shortly. That just had to be. That was one of the great, probably misjustices that we perpetrated on that podcast, was that early Switch hate. But we've owned up to it, and we're still doing our pittance to pay it back after that. Jesus, I don't know what happened. That was a dark time. It was a real dark time in the podcast.
We're surly Wii U lovers. That was the problem.
That's the thing. We're very loyal to the Wii U.
I love the Wii U.
But it's not one of our top 3 though.
No, because everything I'd want to play on it, with like 1 or 2 exceptions, is now on the Switch. So
maybe it's in Jeremy Gregory's top 3.
I was gonna say, like, I remember the exact. If you want to go back to an episode and listen to Billy completely annihilate what would eventually become the Switch.
Now something weird happened that night where I had a soft drink nearby, and I think somebody put something else in it. I think it got switched out for something, for an adult beverage or 2, or more than 2, and that coupled with they must have just announced something that day too, something that didn't. Are you aware of what episode it is? Like, you remember?
Yeah, I do actually. I was trying to find the name of it. It was that one. Okay. It was not Zombies Ate My Neighbors, but it was that one, the sequel to it. Ghoul School. No, not Ghoul School.
Oh.
Ghoul Patrol.
Ghoul Patrol.
Yes.
All right.
Ghoul School. Great episode though.
If you want to hear Billy just go off on this shit, like to the point where he's almost yelling, that is the one. It was like, I think it was the E3. It was some kind of announcement that they did. I think it was the very first announcement, and that was a thing. I enjoyed that whole part of that a lot. I guess for me, number 1 would be, these are systems that I still, for as far as like games I go back to and want to play and think about wanting to play, would be number 1 would be Super NES, number 2 would be PlayStation, and number 3 would be a tie between the Saturn and Dreamcast. Those are just all 3 of those systems, I think, account for probably 70% of the games that I have a lot of nostalgia for, and I still really love playing to this day. I got a soft place in my heart for that damn 3DO, but I don't think I can say, with any sort of sanity, list the 3DO as like a top system for me. But goddamn, I love that stupid system.
Well, this is another time for you to shine, Jeremy Gregory, because I want to know more about this YouTube channel. I think that is the hidden gem of Retrovaniacs. You guys talk about the podcast a lot, and you guys are trying to add some more content to the YouTube channel as well.
Yeah, we actually have a YouTube channel, surprisingly. It is mostly just a bunch of reviews and a few videos of me and my brother going out and trying to do some game and toy hunts. But this has been, the YouTube channel has been going on as long as the podcast has. We actually started those right at the exact same time. And that is something that I generally do by myself. Jeremy has put a review up there himself that he did that was very good. But I think it comes down to it's not easy to make, these kind of videos as it is, like, getting on Twitch and doing stuff like that. You have to know how to edit things and then do all this other stuff to it. And that's time consuming. And it's something that I have found out as well over time. It's not easy to sit down and just do one of these in a night, especially when you don't have a lot of time to put forth to something like that. And I think that's why the last year I really haven't had time to put a lot of effort into it. So this year, I think we're going to really try to get back onto the YouTube channel. Not just me, but I'm roping these other two guys in there with me to do some things other than just throw up some videos of 16-bit brawlers or something, which is what I usually do. So hopefully we'll get that back on track. But yeah, I enjoy the YouTube channel. I think it's a really good YouTube channel. It's got a decent amount of followers to it and things like that, but it's not easy to make a lot of that content. And I guess there's a lot of people that can be just, play game footage and talk over it. And it's like, I don't really want to do that. If I did that, I could just do Twitch. But, I actually enjoy making and editing and things like that, an actual video for YouTube. So that's why I started doing that. And unfortunately, that's kind of why I stopped doing that. It's because it takes a lot of time.
Yeah.
I really enjoy the pawn shopping videos.
Oh yeah. Last year it kind of puts a damper on that now too. I don't know. I assume where Jeremy's at also, but the places open here now are few and far between.
Yeah, it's been hard, especially last year, because we had just started that, and then all of this kind of went down. And for the most part, we couldn't really get out and do this. We couldn't get together and go to these places. There were restrictions. A lot of these places weren't even open. And even whenever you do get to go in, you're just like, there's too many people in here. We need to get out. But hopefully this year, we can get started doing that again, going back to a few of the places. I think the biggest problem with that is we've only got so many places we can go to. And it's a lot of these places have the same things for a very long time because they overprice them to the point where nobody buys them. But I think by now, a lot of places should have some new stuff. Me and my brother are finally getting out and going to some new places and getting out of indie for the first time since all this hit. So hopefully here in the next year, we can really get back into doing that and go into some neat little places.
Yeah. Well, are there any future plans for the podcast you guys want to talk about?
I mean, we don't plan on stopping. At least I don't think so. So we've like we mentioned, we have the Patreon. That's relatively new. We've been doing it for about a year and a half. As we gain listeners, we're talking about doing a third bonus show every month. It might not be. So right now, our bonus shows are always just games generally. But in the past we've done a couple of movie reviews of movies or something that's related to video games. So I think if we do have a third show every month, it's going to be something more along those lines. Maybe not the same thing every month, but just a grab bag show. Because again, it's gonna be hard to fit a fifth game in to play enough to talk about it consistently. But to do something like review an episode of the Pac-Man cartoon or whatever in relation to the game, that would be a fun episode to do, and we could easily do that in an evening without having to spend 2 weeks playing a game to prep for it. So that's the kind of thing I think we're gonna add. Other than that, yeah, like Jeremy said, we're trying to rework with the YouTube channel. That has been 99% Jeremy, but I finally got a new computer that can do more than my old one. My old computer was like 15 years old, and so I was even able to get Skype to work on it and do this podcast. I finally got a new one that I'm using to stream Twitch on, so I obviously can collect game footage. So I'd like to get into that too, but I'm not as good at it. I've tried a couple and I was not happy with them. I kind of like the format of Twitch where I can just ramble and answer questions if people have them, and lose over and over again at one boss or one jump for 3 weeks at a time. That's more my style, but I do want to get more into videos. And then again, our Twitch is new. I didn't start twitching until doing Twitch stuff till December, I guess, and I'm now kind of on 4 or 5 days a week. I know Blue was on for a while, pretty consistently. So that's something we're trying to tie in too. I mean, we can have it reference games either we're going to cover or we have covered, or sometimes just games people ask about that might not be a good episode, but I'll play through it. Why not? So, I don't want to stretch what we do too far out. I don't think we need to, do a movie related podcast. We don't need to do a toy related show. Like, I think if we can stay focused on retro gaming, that's what we do. That's what we know. And I think that's what the people that do follow it want to hear about. So.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I think it's the old, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. I think we've got a good thing going. And obviously we've had, I think we're all very overwhelmed by the response we've had. I always assumed this would be just like a friends and family podcast, and even they would drop off after a few episodes. But no, it's been great, and like we said, kind of the top, we've met some great folks through it, and it's a nice community of people we've interacted with, and I am excited. Maybe if we end up doing that third show, kind of that grab bag type show, obviously, like Jeremy said, a whole other game squeezed in there probably isn't going to be feasible. So it'd be exciting to see what we can do for that. Otherwise, I think we're just kind of working on bolstering up our other, on the rest of our kind of social media presence. It's a pretty active Twitter. Discord has been great, and we're starting to get some new faces in there. So that's exciting. Jeremy I was doing a lot of Twitch last year. I had a job that made it very easy for me to, and then I didn't have a job, which made it very, very easy for me to. And I was carrying that torch, and as soon as I started to stumble, and that torch about hit the ground, he snatched it up. So he's carrying that right now. I am attempting, because last year has thrown my schedule right down through the shitter, and I'm hoping to get that. I'm hoping to pull it back up. I'm getting my hands dirty right now trying to pull it back up from out of there. And hopefully between me and him, with him covering a lot most days of the week, kind of early, and maybe I could pop on a couple of evenings, having a pretty good presence on there. And Jeremy is doing his thing on the YouTube channel, which, Jeremy P is going to pitch in. I'm going to pitch in however I can. I can't edit video at all. They've yet to create a program that is simple enough for me to be able to do anything at all. I don't think I would create anything that would be worthy of putting on there. It doesn't mean I'm going to pitch in where I can, even if I'm just standing on the sidelines cheering Jeremy along as he edits a video. I'll do what I can.
Well, thank you guys so much for taking the time to talk with me this evening. I know we're very active in the Discord with one another and Twitter, Instagram, but this is really nice. And on a personal note, the year I found you guys, it was my grandpa was very sick and he ended up passing away that year. So that the entertainment that you guys provided and continue to provide, nice respite, nice distraction. So thank you for all of your effort and hard work.
Oh, well, it's very much appreciated. And I think that's probably I think that's the best compliment probably a podcast can have, is that it takes your mind off the real world for a little bit, and probably need that more than ever.
Well, that's what we use it for.
That's right.
Exactly.
That's it.
Well, if there are any closing remarks you'd like to share, or you want to plug anything?
I mean, everything we do, you can find on retrovania.net. It has links to the podcast. It has links to our social media, the Twitch feeds. It also has an amazing question form. If you have questions for us, we can answer it on that question form. We'll answer it on the show. But yeah, everything we do is mostly the podcast, YouTube channel, and again, the Twitch stuff lately. So retrovania.net, anything we are doing or will do will be there.
Mm-hmm.
Awesome. And Boss Rush Games kidnaps Billy sometimes.
Every now and then. Every now and then.
For our Talk the Walk.
Talking about walking simulators, because one, they're not retro, and two, I don't want to put it on these guys. I don't want to drag them through, these. Even though Jeremy Gregory's had a hell of a damn recommendation on walking sims in the past, he is the one to thank for me playing through Firewatch, and he's the one to thank for me staring at the TV teary-eyed as I worked my way through it.
Oh gosh, that's a beautiful game.
hmm
Well, thank you guys again so much, and I'm really looking forward to hearing more episodes, and I'm hoping that more people find you guys and pop in on your Twitch streams. Go check out your YouTube channel. And did you guys want to plug your personal Twitter accounts or anything?
No, not my personal Twitter.
Yeah.
No, I guess again, I'm in a band called Subtastics. We do the intro for the Retrovaniacs podcast. We have an album coming out in theory in the next few months, a full length, our first full length album. We have a couple EPs, but our first full length album doesn't have a title yet. Will be out soon. We just finished recording it. But that, again, if you're interested in that band, you can find it at Subtastics Bandcamp. So if you just search on Bandcamp for Subtastics, that's us.
Awesome.
And I don't think I have anything other than just I don't really have anything to plug on my personal Twitter or my burner Twitter, which I use just to complain about professional wrestling a lot. But no, it's all over there on Retrovania's site.
Great. Well, thank you guys so much for participating. Thank you, listeners. You can find us on Boss Rush Games, where we also have a Nintendo Powerblock podcast. We have an Arsenal X for Xbox. We have Crossroads for PlayStation. We have Tower Casuals, the Destiny podcast, and a lot of other people have joined up. So when you have a chance, check it out. But until then, talk to you guys later. Bye, guys.